Hello, this is Chris Finner. I am the digital archivist at the library at Southern Seminary, and I'm also the music and hymnology specialist in the building. Today I want to walk you through some resources we have available through our website, and I hope they will be useful for your research. We're going to start with the library homepage. The address for that is library.sbts.edu. And then here on the left, I'm going to click on this link. It says Databases and E-Resources. At some point in your academic career, I do recommend taking the time to familiarize yourself with all of these materials in this list. There are quite a few items, but for the purposes of music and hymnology, I'm just going to show you a few I think would be most useful for your research. And I'll start here under the letter C with the Canterbury Dictionary of Hymnology. The Canterbury Dictionary of Hymnology is an encyclopedic type resource specifically for the study of hymns and hymnology, but it does have a little bit broader scope and includes some other resources pertaining to congregational song in general. So for example, you can see Darlene Zschech here in the middle from Hillsong. This website has several thousand articles. It is very broad in scope. It has articles written by scholars from all around the world. But just for example, I'll show you, for example, you can find articles about specific hymns, individual hymns like Amazing Grace. You can find articles about hymn writers like John Newton. You can find broader thematic articles, such as these articles on Baptist hymnody in Britain and USA, and even a brief article on our school and the collection we have here. Again, it is also global, so you could find articles on hymnody in other nations, other languages, such as Russian hymnody and things like that. And I'm just going to show you briefly one article, because we're going to end up comparing this across some other websites. So here's the article for Amazing Grace, and it contains a pretty basic history of the text and its publication. It does include some information, a little bit of information about the tune, but not much. And it's a fairly brief article. And here at the bottom, all of these articles are going to have bibliography for further reading. This particular article only has one item for further reading, so make note of that. Some of these articles will have a very, very brief, small bibliography, and others are more extensive. And again, here on the right, you'll see the link to Chris Tomlin, because he wrote an arrangement of Amazing Grace. So the website is not limited entirely to hymnody, although that is the main focus here and the main strength of this website. I'll go back to our list. And here under the letter E, we're going to find a series of websites with digital copies of old books. So for example, the first one I'll show you is this one labeled Early American Imprints. This is a database, a repository of digital copies of old books published in the United States up to 1819 or 1820. So the first book published in the United States was the Bay Psalm Book, a Psalter, published in 1640. So this particular website is going to represent almost 200 years of publication history of items in the United States. And this covers, it includes hymnals, it includes some tune books. It's fairly comprehensive. So just for example, it's going to include the collection the Wesleys published in the United States, called A Collection of Psalms and Hymns from 1737. And it is going to include some other American printings of Wesleyan texts. So you can see those there. And these are just very basic black and white digital scans of these books. So this is a great way to see the original publications of older texts printed up to about 1820 in the United States. The next one, Early English Books Online, another collection of digital books. And as you can see from the description here, this is going to include books published in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, British North America, for the period 1473 up to the year 1700. So this particular collection of digital books is useful for things like English Psalters, the Sternhold and Hopkins Psalters, the first editions of the New Version of the Psalms by Tate and Brady. It's going to include writers like George Herbert from the 1600s, John Milton, and people like that. So digital copies of old books up to the year 1700. This next one, 18th Century Collections Online. Since the other one only goes up to the year 1700, this one covers the 18th century, the century after that, from 1700 to 1800. So this is going to include people like the Wesleys, like Isaac Watts, John Newton, William Cooper, Anne Steele, Augustus Toplady, everyone from that century. And it has a search function, of course, search by author, search by title, but this is again another collection of digital books scanned from the original volumes. Next, I'll show you under the letter G, Grove Music Online, otherwise known as Oxford Music Online. This is based on a music encyclopedia known as the Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians. And this dictionary goes back to the 1800s when it was started by Sir George Grove. And this encyclopedic resource among musicians and among music scholars is often known as, or often perceived as, the gold standard of music encyclopedias. So it's very broad in scope, and it's not particularly geared toward hymnology, but it does have some articles related to hymnology and church music and things like that. So, for example, we can find an article here on the gospel music composer Robert Lowry. This first one is just a small part of a larger article on gospel music, but the proper biographical article is here by Mel Wilhoit. So that is available, and then it's going to show some other related articles. For example, William Howard Doane from the same time period, this article on Isaac Watts by Esther Cruikshank, and some other articles, gospel music, hymnody, things like that. Again, even though this website is not geared specifically toward hymnology, there are things to see here. There are articles here which might be helpful for your research. Articles about composers, articles about hymns and hymnody and church music and things like that, written by scholars. Often these scholars are hymnologists, so they are written by very capable people. Next, the Hathy Trust Digital Library. This is another website for finding scans of digital books and journals. And I would say the most useful one, especially for the study of hymns, is going to be digital copies of the Journal of the Hymn Society. And the journal is just called The Hymn, so I put The Hymn here. And I'm going to search the catalog versus full text. And I changed this to say title, and I'll click search. Here it is. This is the Journal of the Hymn Society, The Hymn. I'll click on the catalog record. And here it lists the whole print run of that journal, starting in 1949 all the way up to 2015. So this is a very handy digital copy of that journal. And the thing I really like about the Hathy Trust website versus a website like Google Books is the way this website is run and organized by librarians. And so it's particularly useful for multi-volume works like this, like a journal, where here all of the volumes are presented in chronological order. They're easy to find and access. Any other kind of multi-volume work, like an encyclopedia set or something like that, they're going to be much more nicely organized than on Google Books. There is a lot of overlap between this website and Google Books, but the organization is a little bit different. The search mechanism is a little bit different. I will say one of the weaknesses, though, of this particular website is the search mechanism. Can be difficult to navigate. But it is possible, for example, to search this journal, and you would do that by clicking Advanced Full Text Search. And you would put your search terms in the first box, searching full text, and then in the title box, you would put The Hymn here, and it will try to pull up search results in items containing the title hymn. So that is a possibility for this website. Again, here we have digital copies of books and journals, Hathy Trust. The next one is the Hymn Tune Index. This is a database containing hymn tunes published in the English language up to the year 1820, and it is very comprehensive, if not completely comprehensive. And this is going to be useful, since it only goes up to 1820, this is going to be useful for English psalters, and it's also going to be useful to see how texts, even though this is a database devoted to tunes, it'll be useful to see how texts were published with music. So, for example, it's good for understanding how the works of Wesley and Watts and Newton and Cooper and Anne Steele were set to music in this time period. So just to give you an example of how that works, down here under the text search, I change this to text. Starts with Amazing Grace, search. There it is, there's the text. And I'll click Find Citations. And we can see in this database, Amazing Grace was only published 3 times with music up to the year 1820. The text itself was first published in 1779, so we're looking at about a window of about 41 years here, but in those 41 years up to 1820, it was only published with music 3 times. And here in this column, this is the name of the collection, and I can click on this and it'll show me a fuller bibliographic citation of what that is. The date, of course, the region. E stands for England. It does have other options for A stands for America, I stands for Ireland. I think it has S for Scotland. That's what that column means. A tune control number, a master number for this tune, the name of the tune, and since the name of the tune sometimes will change from collection to collection, that's why there's also this master control number. The text, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. The composer it was attributed to in that collection. The key and the voicing. Here under this column, 1/2, the 1 means the melody is in the top voice, and it was a 2-part arrangement. This one here, 3/4, it means the melody is in the third voice, which would probably be the tenor voice, and it was a 4-part arrangement. So how do we get more information about these tunes? Well, I'm going to click on this control number to learn more about this tune, Hephzibah. And I'll click Find Citations. And so here it's going to show me this tune was published many times between 1790 and 1820. And so it was not always published with Amazing Grace, and you can see all these different text codes, and you can see, well, it was published with all these different texts. Only sometimes, this is Amazing Grace, only a few times with Amazing Grace. And the name, again, there's the control number, but the name sometimes changed. And these numbers here on top, so given this is a database about hymn tunes, you might wonder, well, how can I see these tunes? Well, the tune information is here coded in these numbers, or these are degrees of the music scale. U means up, so the first interval here is from 5 to 1 going up. The parentheses mean passing tones. The dash separates the musical phrases. The D means down. The brackets mean, in this particular case, the text repeats, or the composer has created an arrangement of the tune such that part of the text will repeat itself. That's what the brackets mean. And you can see the meter, and it's a major tune, earliest citation, things like that. So in this case, if a person really wanted to know what this sounded like, in theory you could try to hammer this out, although it doesn't show any indications of rhythm. Probably the best thing to do would be to look at this bibliographic citation. And since we've already looked at some of those other sites where we can find digital copies of old books, this one being printed in 1790, I would say best candidate would be to look in 18th century collections online, and we might be able to find this online somewhere. And then you could see the tune as it was printed. So that's the hymn tune index. Next one is the hymnary. I think these days most church musicians are somewhat acquainted with this website. So I just want to show you some advanced features you might not know about. And I'll click on this advanced search link here. There are a number of options for searching through this website, searching through this database. For example, this would be a way to search for Amazing Grace in a different language. So here in the text box I put Amazing Grace. Under language I can put Spanish, and then under result type you'll get the narrowest results, or most often the best results if you change this to say instances. Click search, and then it'll show me there are on this website there are 7 examples of Amazing Grace published in Spanish. So that's an example of one kind of advanced search. Another option here, Amazing Grace. This website can be good for planning for congregational worship. I can tell you in my church we use the African American Heritage Hymnal. So I've put Amazing Grace as the text, and I want it to search specifically in this hymnal for that text. And again, I'm going to change this to say instances. And it's going to show me in the African American Heritage Hymnal, Amazing Grace appears 3 times. These 2 here are the text by John Newton. This one here is the text by Dottie Rambo, Amazing Grace Shall Always Be My Song of Praise. But here there are 2 different tunes for Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound in this hymnal. So that's another example of a possible advanced search. Now I will say I am logged into this website, and I do recommend if you don't have an account, please consider signing up for an account. It's a free resource, but if you're logged in, you might be able to access more options than if you are not logged in. I know sometimes with the images, there are different levels of access. I have editorial access, so I can probably see more images on here than you would be able to if you just have a regular free account. But I do recommend signing in because you might be able to access more materials that way. And I'm going to show you some other features here, some things you might not have noticed. And we'll look at the main page for Amazing Grace. Of course, it has the author information, some other tidbits of information, some other notes about the hymn. Here under the tunes section, it's going to show me all the tunes published with this text. And just for example, I clicked on this link. It says all tunes published with Amazing Grace. And so in this case, it's going to show me all the tunes published with Amazing Grace, and it's going to put them by default, put them in order by the number of matches. So here at the top is New Britain, the most popular tune. The tune itself appears in 324 hymnals, but in terms of being matched with that text, 256 matching examples of this tune with that text. And the next example, Arlington, with 11 pairings of that text and tune, and then 10 matching instances, and so forth. So some hymns we sing, they are pretty tightly connected to certain tunes, but some other hymns are not so well associated with any particular tune. So this option is a good way sometimes to see which tunes are being used for particular texts. Now, I will also point out this database, this website, the indexing of the tunes is not as extensive as the indexing of the texts, especially for the older hymnals, the older scans. A lot of the older scans do not have indexing information for the tunes, so there is that limitation to where the tune indexing is not as comprehensive as the text indexing. But this is a database at its root, at its core. This website is a database. Down here at the bottom, this is the actual database part, and I'll show you that here in a moment. But before that, I want to show you in this box here where it shows page scans. It's useful to know by default these scans appear in chronological order, in reverse chronological order. So sometimes just skimming through here, this is an easy way just to get a sense of how the hymn has been published over time. And I could go all the way to the end, and it's going to show me the oldest ones first, or last, really. And we could kind of skim these backwards. But that's kind of how that works. They're by default in order, reverse chronological. So you could just get a basic sense of how the hymn has been published over time just looking at those scans. But here's the raw material here. This is the database, and this is going to show me all of the hymnals where Amazing Grace has been published. And by default, it's only going to show me hymnals since 1979. But if I want to see everything, I'm going to click on this link here where it says All Instances. And it'll show me everything. And I'm a historian. I almost always will change this so it's sorted by publication date, ascending or descending, depending on what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to see. So now it has all, in the database, it has 1,298 examples of Amazing Grace. The first published example being from 1789, and now they are all arranged in chronological order. So this particular feature is useful for seeing the publication history of a hymn over time. So that's how that works. Okay, I'll go back to our database page. Next one on the list we want to see is Hymnology Archive. This is a newer resource. It was launched in 2018. And in comparing this one to the Canterbury Dictionary of Hymnology, they're both encyclopedic type websites devoted to the study of hymns. But whereas the Canterbury site is very broad and has thousands of articles, Hymnology Archive tends to go more for depth. And so currently it only has a few hundred pages, but those pages are presented in great detail. So, for example, we can look at Amazing Grace. I'm going to browse by text. Amazing Grace. And this article, here at the top you can see it has the visual example. This is the first printing from 1779. A detailed explanation of the history of the text. Some analysis, scriptural analysis. Some description of the development of the text over time, how it has changed. And again, there are visual examples illustrating various versions of the text. A brief mention here, a shout out to Chris Tomlin and his version. And then here under tunes, it also has a very detailed history of the tune settings. Now, whereas a lot of the articles on Canterbury might have only a brief reference to how the hymn was sung, these articles on Hymnology Archive are going to have very detailed analysis and presentation of how the texts were sung. So when we were on the hymn tune index, we saw this tune, Hephzibah. And so here on this website, Hymnology Archive, here you can actually see this. So this is a printing. This is the first printing of Hephzibah when it was associated with the text Amazing Grace. So as you can see here, the text itself was not actually given with the tune, but up here where it says hymn 190, it's a reference to this other hymnal collection. And so you can kind of see how that pairing works. And then here's a history of the tune New Britain, first printed in 1829 with a different text, Come Let Us Join Our Friends Above. And then there's some explanation of the early publication history of that tune. And then finally, the first pairing of this tune with this text in 1835. So again, this is going to be much more detailed than what you will find on Canterbury. And there are two main types of pages on this site. There are pages devoted to individual texts, and there are pages devoted to authors. So I'll click on John Newton here, and you can see what an author page looks like. Starts with a biography, a very nice portrait image. The portrait images on this website are going to be generally much nicer and much higher quality than on other websites like the Hymnology or Canterbury or other related sites. And then down here, extensive list of resources related to John Newton. So here's a list of the individual texts covered on this website. Here are publications of hymns by John Newton in his lifetime. And these here are given in multiple editions, all with PDF copies. So Amazing Grace was first printed here in 1779. You could click this link and look for that in the first edition of Only Hymns, digital copy. That's super handy. Related works published by John Newton. Most of these are going to be in PDF. Collected works editions, manuscripts. This is really neat. The manuscript for Only Hymns is kept at Harvard University. It is incomplete. It's a partial manuscript, but if you were to click this link, you could see some really nice color scans of the manuscript. That's a neat feature. Biographies of John Newton, including some going back to 1808, available in digital copies, and some other related resources, articles about Newton's hymns, some other helpful websites. So there's a lot to see here on Hymnology Archive. And I'll also point out this resources page. This is going to be another useful tool for your studies. The resources are grouped together in various ways. The hymnology databases, there's Canterbury, there's Hymnology, there's the Hymn Tune Index, a couple of others. The main organizations, the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada. Here's a link to the journal at Hathi Trust. We already looked at that. Some blogs about hymns. These are going to be useful sometimes for hymn analysis, devotional analysis, scriptural analysis, things like that. Getting other people's perspectives on those hymns. Digital repositories, digital books, and we've looked at some of these already. There's the Hathi Trust, there's the Early American Imprints, Early English Books, 18th Century Collections. Sounding Spirit is a new digital library for hymnals, but currently it's very small. But that's there. And then here on the right column, some general books about hymnology, about hymns and hymnology, and these are in reverse chronological order. The books, the ones in public domain here are given with links to digital copies, which is super helpful. So you can see those on your own. And then this list, hymnals with companions. Most major denominational hymnals are published with companions or handbooks, and those companion volumes are going to include history about all the texts and all the tunes in that hymnal. So one of the newest ones is the companion to the Lutheran Service Book, released just last year. It's a major work. And again, these ones in the public domain are going to include links to digital copies. and these go all the way back to 1867. So that's Hymnology Archive. JSTOR is sometimes really helpful for searching through periodicals. I would say in this case the most helpful one for the study of music is the Musical Times. It was a major music publication published in London, and JSTOR has some really nice digital copies from the Musical Times. The other one I want to point out real quick is under the letter R, Rillam Abstracts of Music Literature. This is a search tool for articles and dissertations related specifically to music. So whereas there are a number of search mechanisms in the database list and through the library site for searching through periodicals and dissertations, this one in particular is going to be limited just to materials related to music. So it might be a helpful tool to narrow the scope of your search if you're looking for something along those lines. So those are the ones I wanted to show you related to music and hymnology. If you have any trouble with any of these, you can send me an email, cjfenner@sbts.edu. I know, for example, the Canterbury website can be difficult to access off campus, so if you have any trouble with that, just send me an email and I'll do what I can to help you with these and answer any other questions you might have. Thank you.